There we go. Welcome to Torah for today, February 15th, 2024, with our cast of characters as usual. And we look forward to sharing with you today. We're going to begin with a blessing, and then we'll do some studies. So let's join together in a blessing. Baruch
Atah Adonai
Eloheinu melech haolam asher
asher
kishanu
kishanu
b'mitzvotav
b'mitzvotav
tivanu v'sok b'divrei
divrei Torah.
Amen. All right, so to understand where we are in our Torah reading, we are in the portion of Trumah, which means that 2 weeks ago we read about the Ten Commandments, about the Israelites hearing this very anthropomorphic description of the Torah, of hearing the Ten Commandments as given by God. And then, by the way, different commentators, whether they heard all of it from God or whether they just heard the first two, because the tense changes from second to third, from first person to third person. Or if you want to take the Buberian approach, it was just the word Anochi, I, and that was the totality of the revelation. But anyway, the people have this experience. Moses goes back up. Remember last week's portion, Mishpatim, they come down. He writes these laws of Mishpatim in the Sefer Habrit. He reads it to the people, and we have a Sefer Habrit. Now he's back up the mountain again. By the way, he must have been in great shape.
Great shape.
I mean, right, think about it. He was going schlepping up and down this mountain, regularly. And so now he's up and getting additional commands. And these are these are about the building of the tabernacle. Okay. And so we're going to, by the way, in Hebrew, Mishkan. What is it? What's the grammatical root of Mishkan? What does it mean in Hebrew?
Gal,
Right?
Gal, live.
To dwell, right?
Well.
By the way, a shchuna is a neighborhood.
Mhm.
A shechen is a neighbor, right, Leora?
Yep.
And so it has to do with dwelling, and the famous line at the beginning, Asuli mikdash b'shachanti b'tocham, make me a mikdash that I shall dwell amongst them. And the rabbi saying it's that the dwelling amongst them is not in the tent. It's rather about with the people. So we're going to talk about what is the tent and what the tabernacle, what its purpose is. So let's get going here. All right. So this is Exodus 25, the very beginning part of our portion. And let's go ahead. Let's get Lauren. Are you in the mood to read? Maybe it'll warm you up.
Sure. Can you hear me? You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, and they take for me an offering, and every man whose heart maketh him willing, ye shall take my offering. And this is the offering which ye shall take of them: gold and silver and brass and blue and purple and scarlet and fine linen and goat's hair and the ram skins dyed red and seal skin and acacia wood, oil for the lamp and spices for anointing oil and for the sweet incense, and onyx stones and stones to be set for the ephod,
correct.
for the breastplate. And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show thee, and the pattern of the tabernacle, and the pattern of the furniture thereof. And even so shall ye make it.
All right,
and they shall make an ark of acacia wood, and 2 cubits and a half shall be the length thereof, breadth thereof, and 1.5 cubits the height.
All right. So you sort of, was she fading in and out a little bit for everybody? All right. So, but I think
I
we
was
got the
fading
text.
in and out.
It's okay. No, it's all right. I think but you were able to follow the text, everybody, correct? And understand. So what stands out in terms of the things that they brought? We raised this before. Rob.
Where in the desert are they supposed to get seal skin?
All right. So where are they getting? By the way, seal skin. Sometimes it's dolphin skin. It's translated in other places.
Well, where do they get that?
Same question.
Exactly. So here's what I'm going to show you. Rashi. What does Rashi say about it? Right? Tachash was a kind of wild beast. It existed only at that time when Israel built the tabernacle. It was multicolored, and then translated by the Targum as sisguna, and translated here as sas, and prides itself on its colors. So, how do you get out of the idea of a dolphin skin or seal skin is to say, well, it really isn't. That's the more modern name, but really it is. It was an animal that existed only at that time, right, Eileen? Isn't that a great approach?
Well, it's a good story.
Ibn Ezra. I'm sorry. In our the Eitz Chaim version, when I went to see if they had a comment here, it said that it was colored goat skin. So somehow it had a color that made it look like it. But as I was researching this, I found a quaint modern midrash trying to make sense of this. So are you in the mood for a modern midrash?
Sure.
By Rabbi Mark Gelb, who's a Reform rabbi and who's just very creative. And I'll read it for you. So here we go. Exodus 26:14, and we read, "Make for the tent a covering of tanned ram skins and a covering of dolphin skins above." And we ask, why dolphin skins? When our ancestors, the children of Israel, escaped from Egypt, they found the dolphins of the Red Sea waiting for them, chirping their happy dolphin chirping sounds, splashing the blue waters of the Red Sea with their flat tails. Suddenly, the Israelites heard the terrible sounds of Pharaoh's great army chasing them from Egypt. Long spears clanking and horses' hooves pounding the dry earth as the Egyptians pulled the war chariots with the metal wheels and the pointed hubs. "We are trapped," the children of Israel exclaimed. "If we go back to Egypt, Pharaoh and his army will kill all of us." And about this, they were absolutely right. "And if we go forward, we will all drown in the Red Sea." But about this time, the people were quite wrong. Moses raised his arm, and God split the Red Sea right down the middle, so the two huge walls of water stood straight up with a narrow path of dry Red Sea bottom in between. The side of the Red Sea split in half right down the middle with a hallway of dry land in between was amazing and confusing to the children of Israel. But can you just imagine how amazing and confusing this was to the fish of the Red Sea? Now, let's face it, fish are dumb. Your average Red Sea fish would be swimming along just minding its own fish business when suddenly it would be swimming in midair, and which is nowhere if you're a fish. Fish, and more fish just kept plopping and flopping through the wall of the water and flopping around in the dry hallway of the Red Sea bottom. The dolphins tried to save their friends, the fish. They swam quickly along the edge of the walls of the water, chirping a warning in fish language. "Don't go there." But just as I said before, fish are dumb. And so they would ask, "What do you mean don't go there? And where is there?" And the dolphins would scream, "There in the air." And then the fish would say, "Huh? We don't see any air there." And of course, by the time this conversation was over, the fish were already there in the air, which is nowhere if you're a fish. As if the problem of the dumb fish in the air was not enough for them, the kindly dolphins of the Red Sea had another problem. Our ancestors, the children of Israel, left Egypt with some flocks of sheep and goats and a few cows, and on their way across the Red Sea on the dry hallway of land, some of those flocks strayed a little and walked right through the walls of the water and right into the bottoms of the Red Sea, which is nowhere if you're a sheep or a goat or a cow. So the dolphins would swim quickly to the bottom of the Red Sea and nudge the animals back into the air, which is somewhere if you're a goat or a sheep or a cow. Now, if the problems of dumb fish and dumb animals were not enough for the kindly dolphins of the Red Sea, there was another problem for them. The army of Pharaoh was gaining on our ancestors. The children of Israel, in their race across the dry hallway, the Red Sea bottom, the dolphins tried to slow down Pharaoh's army by flicking their tails to the walls of water and showering Pharaoh's army on the dry hallway of Red Sea bottom so it was not dry anymore. Because of the flicking, the wheels of the Pharaoh's war chariots got stuck in the mud. Then God warned the dolphins that the children of Israel were almost all safely on the other side of the Red Sea hallway, and that the walls of the water would soon collapse on Pharaoh's army. But the dolphins were so busy warning the fish, pushing the flocks, and flicking Pharaoh's army that some of them did not hear God's warning. Thus, when the walls of water came crashing together to make the Red Sea whole again, a few dolphins were sucked down into the spears, onto the arrows, onto the swords, and onto the pointed hubs of Pharaoh's war chariots. The next day, along with the junk of Pharaoh's army, there were some dead dolphins washed up on the shores of the Red Sea. Our ancestors, the children of Israel, complained to Moses, "Let us get out of here. The place stinks of dead things." But God commanded Moses, and Moses told the people to gather up all the dolphins, prepare their skins, and sew them together to make a tent covering that would be the top of the tent for the great golden box that would hold the words of God written on the stone tablets by Moses on Mount Sinai. Moses said, "When you see this tent of dolphin skins, I want you to remember that we did not leave Egypt and become a free people without a lot of help." When our ancestors, the children of Israel, left their camp at the shore of the Red Sea, the dolphins were waiting for them, chirping their happy dolphin chirping sounds and splashing the blue waters of the Red Sea with their flat tails.
I like that story. It's a good story.
Isn't that, of
It's
Midrash?
cool. Very imaginative.
Isn't that something? Like, he wants to, and he's very creative way, say, let's take it its literal way. How could this have happened? By the way, the rabbi is no more crazier than some of the rabbis midrashim, right?
Actually, I think it's a lot better because it's amusing. It's like a story you would tell a child.
Good. Yeah, Stan, go ahead.
Rabbi Mark Gelman is a friend of Rabbi Feinstein's, and they do a weekly Torah study together that's recorded on Friday afternoon on the VBS website. Usually lasts about 40 minutes or something like that. And they discuss the Torah portions. And Gelman's been with them for the last couple of years or more, and comes up with, he's done these midrashim. That's one of the things he was famous for. And he also did a series with a Catholic rabbi, a Catholic priest, rather.
That's good. Yeah.
So anyway, you can get more if you want through that website.
Yeah, Mark, thank you. He's well known. He's written a number of pieces and very creative writing. Leora.
Rabbi, I have to give you a warm feeling that you just read this. It took me back when the children were little and you were a young rabbi at our synagogue, and you gather everybody, all the children, and that's exactly how I felt. Thank you very much. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. By the way, Leora, sad news. By the way, I yesterday officiated the funeral of Miss Sherry.
Yeah, I saw that. We got the how old
Is
is
there
she?
any way to go visit them? Do you know?
I'm sorry, what?
Is there a way to go visit them? Or
No, they're not sitting shiva. They're not doing. Those of you who don't know, Miss Sherry was the founding director of the preschool at Temple Aliyah about 1974. And then was here through about 1996, and she was an institution and just a remarkable woman. Not just a school director, but she was an integral part of Temple Aliyah.
Rabbi, how old was she? Did they?
She was 96.
96.
Yeah, she was perky. By the way, I learned, those of you who knew her, I never knew this about her. When she was much younger, in her early 20s, I guess, she was a magician.
Oh.
And her cousin Millie she was a clown, and they used to do kids' parties and other events where she was the magician and Millie was the clown, and they were lifelong friends. So it's really amazing. All right, let's go on with our studies, because now we're going to get to understand. The question is, what is this tabernacle really about? Why do they need a tabernacle? By the way, there's a whole question. I don't know if any of you have heard about this. Last week we talked about Ein Mukdam U'Muachar b'Torah, right? There's no early and no late in the Torah. Did we talk about that? Or no? That was another group. Right. It's a principle, Eileen. When the rabbis believe that a section of Torah somehow doesn't fit exactly where it's at, there's a principle that says there's no chronological order of the Torah. And so in great rabbinic permissive nature, they can move one set of text to another place.
Yeah.
They can shove it somewhere else.
Right, George, and that helps them, George,
Yeah.
to be able to reconcile some apparent contradictions in a very easy way, rather than having to explain. They say, no, this actually happened later or earlier.
Yeah, Rabbi. I think it's kind of a Western, civilization thinking to have history in a chronological order. A lot of cultures, they skip around, It's not, from day 1 to day 2 to day 3, like we would do it here.
I think it's a great point. And it ties to the idea that, how we think about how time is structured is different in terms, especially in narrative, George, right? It
A history, we'd have a history going chronologically where.
Yeah, it's really a narrative. And by the way, George, I don't know about you, I love those movies that, although they're hard to follow sometimes, that
They start from the end. Or
they go back and forth. You have to figure out which timeline they're in. Exactly. Steve, go ahead, please.
A question. I'm always struck when I read about these details. Here is God telling the Hebrews how detailed to make the tabernacle, and it strikes me it's kind of absurd. To me, it strikes me as absurd. Here is God, the author of the universe, prescribing tiny details, and so what is there any midrash that explains that?
Yeah, there's certain things.
It is so great. Yeah, Bob, do you want to respond to that, Bob?
I got 2 things.
Yeah, please, Bob, go ahead.
I just want to mention that Rabbi Jonathan Sachs had a wonderful drash about this parsha. He compares it briefly to the creation story.
Yeah.
And
we're going to get into that. So we're going to get into. Oh no, actually, no. I'm sorry. We're going to get into Mount Sinai. So go ahead. You can share this one then.
Okay. Well, the creation story is roughly. Well, obviously, it's the creation of the entire universe, which is this monumental creation, and the instructions for creating the Mishkan are about double the length of the story of the creation. And Rabbi Sachs makes a comment that it was by Moses and God asking the people to bring their resources to build the tabernacle, that was the creation of the nation of Israel. That was the founding action.
Yeah. So yeah, Bob. So there is this idea that if you can divide it up into 7 sections, and that each one, is reflecting in terms of the creation narrative itself, and that this is the physical manifestation of experiencing creation. So, by the way, the menorah, therefore, Bob, would be the tree, and of the begin in the garden at the beginning of creation. So so it's a beautiful. So I'm glad. So if that's the answer, right, Steve? If that's one answer, yeah. Just as there was exactness in creation, so there is the measurements and the construction of the tabernacle reflect creation, so it has to be exact. So good, George.
Yeah, something interesting, like in the second line, we're giving, but they don't use the word natan, lakach. We're taking teruma. In other words, we're giving charity, but we're actually receiving.
It's a great midrash, George, right? In terms of, and especially when you talk about tzedakah.
Rabbis getting donations.
Yeah, they're absolutely. All right, let's go to Ramban, Nachmanides, and he's going to, we're going to get his understanding. I'm going to just go all the way through the text so I don't have to make you dizzy. Let me share here. All right. And Eileen, would you
Yeah, okay. Once God had spoken face to face, telling them the 10 Commandments, and commanded Israel through Moses, They were holy and worthy for there to be a sanctuary in their midst, to rest his divine presence amongst them. Now, since the main objective of the tabernacle was to be a place for the rest of the divine presence, which was to rest upon the ark, he therefore put the commandment regarding the ark and the ark cover first. Here, for the ark is primary in importance. He then adjoined to the description of the ark the commandments regarding the table and the menorah, for they, like the ark, are furnishings for the tabernacle, and given an indication of the essence of the tabernacle, which was made for housing them.
Right. So, I mean, what we're saying is that the most important part of the tabernacle is clearly the Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark. Right? They're going to put in it the tablets of the Ten Commandments. By the way, including the broken ones. Do you all know that?
Yeah.
Right? Including the broken ones, because they still had a holy status. And in fact, the rabbis learn. This is what, Steve, I love this about the rabbis. They try and learn lessons of common decency and relationships from the stories and the narrative. So they compared the broken tablets, George, do you know this one, to elderly.
Oh.
And they say, just as the broken set of tablets still retain their holiness, so too do those who have knowledge and lost their knowledge in old age and need to be treated with the same respect.
That's very good.
Isn't that amazing, Eileen?
Well, considering I'm one of the elderly, it's wonderful.
No, but the rabbis are always look. We always have, of course, the Torah talks about you shall, respect your elders and rise before, the distinguished elders. And so, but I love how they learn that lesson. By the way, besides the two sets of tablets, what else was eventually placed in the ark?
The menorah.
No. Nope.
That was in the tabernacle, specifically in the ark itself. George, do you know?
Nope.
Leora?
I think it's Joseph's stone bones.
No. His bones were taken separately, and taken as they left Egypt. Two things. One is the staff of Moses, or the staff, that was used, and it's floured, and they put it in there, and also a jar of manna.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
And that was actually in last week's portion.
Right.
Which, by the way, George, I want to talk about Ein Mukdam Meuchar by the Torah. It actually mentions about putting it in the ark before the ark is commanded to be built.
Ah. Okay.
So, right. So it's an interesting conundrum there. All right, let's go.
Wait, but
Go
didn't
ahead.
Moses need his staff? He was still alive.
Yeah, he did later on. Is it Aaron? Oh, no, it's Aaron's staff. Thank you. I'm sorry. It was Aaron's staff, I think, that was put in. Yeah. All right, let's continue. And let's go on. Bob, would you like to read? You have to unmute, though.
I'll give it a try. The esoteric significance of the Mishkan is that the glory that rested upon Mount Sinai should rest upon the tabernacle, but in a concealed manner. Thus, the glory that appeared to the people at Mount Sinai remained constantly with Israel in the tabernacle. He would receive the same level of divine communication that was spoken to him at Mount Sinai. And just as it says regarding the giving of the Torah, from heaven he caused you to hear his voice in order to teach you, and on earth. He showed you his great fire. So too regarding the tabernacle, it is written, he heard the voice speaking to him from atop the cover, from heaven the two cherubim, and he spoke to him. The voice would come from heaven to above the ark cover and speak to Moses from there. For every communication with Moses originated in heaven during the day and was herded Moses
Yeah, no, yeah. It was. I'm assuming that this was heard by Moses.
Okay, Moses from between the two cherubs. The giving of the Torah was in fire. So too the cherubs were made of gold.
Right. So Bob, here where you said about creation, he's creating the connection between the tabernacle and Mount Sinai.
Mhm.
All right. So keep going.
The Mishkan Rambam explains serves as a vehicle to perpetuate the Sinai experience. Once Bnei Yisrael had experienced the great encounter with God at the mountain, it was his desire that they be able to keep this experience, albeit in a more confined manner, with them as they traveled to Eretz Yisrael. The Rambam's approach explains the numerous similarities between the Mishkan and the Mamad Har Sinai.
Right. So that's in Hebrew, that's what we call Mamad Har Sinai, the encounter of Mount Sinai. Leora, would you like to read the example? Right. So here are some examples. No, not Leora. Okay. So let's go with George. Are you up to reading?
Here are a few examples, that part.
Yeah.
Okay, just as God had spoken to the Bnei Yisrael at Mount Sinai, so too does he continue to speak to them via Moshe from the Kodashim, Holy of Holies, through Keruvim, cherubim, atop the Aron, the ark.
Right. So you can imagine, right? So the voice is coming from on top of the mountain or from the top of the, right, the Keruvim, the cherubs that were on top of the Holy Ark. Go ahead. Luchot Haidut.
Luchot Haidut, the tablets of testimony, which Moshe will receive in 24:12 on Mount Sinai, served as a testimony to the giving of the Torah, and thus will be kept in the Aron, the focal point of the Mishkan. The cloud created by the incense altar symbolizes a cloud that covered Mount Sinai. Okay.
So right, when they inside the tabernacle, there was incense.
Yeah.
Probably, right, George, to cover up the stink of sacrifices.
Maybe.
All right.
That was inside, okay, this holy part, and the sacrifices were outside of it.
But they were right on the inside, I think. I think you're right.
Yeah.
So
maybe
the incense, so the idea of there being an altar and the relationship between Mount Sinai again. Okay. Go ahead with the last one, George.
The fire on the altar, Vayikra, Leviticus 6:6, symbolizes the fire that descended on Mount Sinai, Shemot 24:17. The laws of the altar reflect the covenant ceremony took place just before Moshe ascended Mount Sinai. Okay.
Right. All right. So they're trying to Ramban, and these are like just examples of compare like the idea that the tabernacle is taking Mount Sinai with them. We'll talk more about that. But George, the point of the incense being on the inside, by the way, is that to cover up the stench when you're in the Holy of Holies.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
that somehow, right, that shouldn't take over. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to do a little bit more, and then we're going to tie this all together, because this is from right, Reb Chaim of Volozhin, right, Rabbi Talmudist ethicist, popularly known as Reb Chaim Volozhoner, simply as Reb Chaim, right, 1803. By the way, was founder of the yeshiva in Lithuania and like becomes the model of yeshivot. Let's go on. Kathleen, would you like to read, please?
For the tabernacle and the holy temple integrated all the powers and worlds and all the arrangements of holiness, all the buildings and treasuries, upper floors and rooms, and all the holy utensils. All are per an exalted template. And this is what is written in the Drash Tanshuma, that it is equal in importance to the creation of the world. And therefore the text wrote about
Bezalel was the name of the person designated to build the tabernacle.
Oh, yeah.
And what does it say about him, Kathleen? Quote.
And I will fill him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, understanding, and knowledge.
By the way, so I just want to tell you, so those three words, wisdom, are Binah. What's the second one? George?
I don't know, it spells Chabad, doesn't it?
Okay, well, what is it, right?
Chachma,
Binah, Chachma, and Da'at.
Da'at, yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, by the way, if you've ever wondered where Chabad comes from, it's an acronym of those three types of wisdom. And how do the rabbis distinguish them? By the way, I love this piece. It's a great. What is the different? George, did you ever learn what the three different types of wisdom are?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. So the first one is Chokhmah. By the way, in Pirkei Avot, we are taught Ezehu Hacham, same word. Who is wise? George, what's the answer? Halomed Mikol
Who learns from
Adam.
everyone.
Who learns from everyone.
Yeah.
So Chokhmah is the wisdom we learn from others. By the way, it could be from a book, could be from people, could be from anything. It's wisdom we learn. Binah is the wisdom of deduction and induction, of where you learn something beyond the first level, right? You've applied it to learn another level. And da'at, the final one, is divine wisdom, right? It's wisdom that we gain from God.
Yeah, excuse me. In decision theory, there's different stages, facts, knowledge of the facts and all that, but then wisdom is a higher thing. It's not just knowing different facts piled on top. It's experience and tying things together, and it's a higher level in decision theory.
So George, so that's Binah.
Okay.
Right. The last one is divine knowledge. It's really knowledge that we
They don't teach that in college. Okay.
No. It fits in with the idea of knowledge.
Yeah.
Ecology, all those areas, correct?
Yeah.
But it's important that to understand from the religious mindset. By the way, the way that I explain this, George, is almost like a Mozart. Or in arts and theater, like where does that come from? How is it that they possess this, right? Lauren, exactly. Like it's so far beyond anything. Right. There is this knowledge they see that comes directly from God. So that's just my own personal comparison. Anyway, that is Kathleen. Those are the three areas that the rabbis talk about here that Bezalel had. He had wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Continue.
For with these three items the worlds were created, as it is written, Hashem with wisdom founded the earth, established the heavens with understanding. Therefore the sages stated that Batzal, still saying that wrong, knew to combine the letters with which the heavens and the earth were created.
Right. So Bezalel he has this mystical power. He has this divine knowledge, George. That's why it's important that da'at, right? Directly from God. He has this understanding that other human beings don't have. By the way, what does Bezalel mean? Leoric, break it down for me. Bezalel.
In the shadow of God.
In the shadow, right?
Image
or image or shadow of God, right? Isn't that beautiful? Like somehow Bezalel was created and his name given understanding for this moment. Right? He was the one and the only one who would know how, Steve, to take the instructions and to translate them into a divine reality. Right? So that's why Bezalel is unusual. Kathleen, continue.
Therefore, a man from the holy nation, who is also comprised of all the structures and processes of creation, he is also the model and plan of the tabernacle and the temple and all its utensils, organized according to the plan of the organs or limbs and components and sinews and all its powers. And therefore the Zohar details the entirety of the plans of the tabernacle and its utensils, for they are all hinted at in man, a one-to-one correspondence. For this reason, definitely the focal point of holiness and the holy temple and the appearance in a particular place of the godly presence is man. Wow. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, Kathleen, so it's more than just a physical structure, right? It's actually built to channel in this mystical way the energy of heaven and earth and God. And so from that perspective, Steve, that's why it has to be so exact. Like this is like a mystically magical place that has to be constructed exactly in this way in order to channel those powers from heaven and earth and God and back and forth.
Okay.
So Kathleen, you
answer.
got this one.
For if he makes himself as holy as is possible by fulfilling the commandments.
Oh, wait, hold on. Wait a minute. Where did you, where are you now?
Okay, well, I just said for this reason, definitely.
Okay, go ahead.
So then I've started, for if he makes himself as holy as is possible by fulfilling the commandments, then he becomes the actual temple, and within him dwells God. And as they say, and I will dwell within them. It does not say among them, but rather within them.
Right. So now he's applied it, Kathleen, to the individual, right? God will actually dwell in us. And this is the vehicle, right, that allows it to happen. I love this. We're going to skip a couple of these paragraphs. They just get a little bit dense, but here's a sort of an explanation of it. And so let's see. Eileen, Stan, did you read yet? No, you haven't read yet, have you?
No.
Go ahead, Stan. Rav Chaim explains.
Rav Chaim explains that man has incredible power in this world. He represents the literal temple who can draw down through positive acts godliness into this world. The temple then is a model for how man should act and is very much relevant for him even nowadays. In another place, Rav Chaim explains that it is not the wicked enemies of the Jewish people that destroy the temple. Instead, when Jewish people do not fulfill their own responsibility to become, quote, temples within themselves, the building of the temple loses its purpose and therefore has no need to exist.
Right, Kathleen, right? We are temples, each of us, and in this mystical model. It's a beautiful image. We're going to go one more. Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who's very well known, first leader of what was to become Chabad Lubavitch. All right, was prolific, but actually Baal Shem Tov. I'm not sure. Oh, I'm sorry. This is Chabad, right? He produced works for both mysticism and Jewish law. His works form the cornerstone of Chabad Lubavitch teaching, ability to explain even the most issues of Torah, made his writings popular to Torah scholars everywhere. I'm also, he obviously, very influential in the beginning of Chabad. Lauren, go ahead.
I don't want to read, but I'm confused. Do we need a temple to become a temple? It seems to me like I'm very confused.
We are, if we're not, as I understood it, well, anybody want to take a chance rather than me trying to answer it? Anybody want to, Stan, you want to take a shot at it?
We've adapted the word temple to be part of our being. That's we've created that world, and I think that's word, and that's where it comes from.
So like when you say your body is a temple, it's like a temple. Our bodies are temples.
All right, so that's one. George, how about you?
Yeah, well, they said we lost the temples because of ourselves. And the first temple was Avodah Zarah, among others. And the second was Sinat Chinam, where there's Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, that story. And the Zealots who destroyed all the food supply, so they had to fight instead of reconciling with Rome, if that would have been possible. So, the second was Sinat Chinam. So both of us, according to the rabbis, it's us.
So we're the temples.
So right.
We caused it. We caused the destruction.
Right. I think, George, I'm going to take it, a step further, Lauren, as I understand it, is that the real goal is not about building a temple or tabernacle. It's that we become temples.
Okay.
We become the temples.
Right. That Kathleen, that's what appealed to Kathleen, is that we are temples. And in that relationship with God, and that's why it says, "Make for me the tabernacle, the shachanti b'tocham. I will dwell in them." God dwells in us when we make ourselves like a temple,
right? Because that's what when the pandemic, when you couldn't go to a temple, people still felt close to God through Zoom, through other means. You still, buildings stayed empty, but you still had that power to feel God within you. So it wasn't necessarily the temple that was making you feel close to God. it was everything else around you, I guess.
Yeah. No, there's many ways of understanding what's more. Remember, Hasidism was not about building sanctuaries. It was actually, for them, by the way, they would pray in the fields.
Right.
They were like trying to perceive God in different ways and so that's why, Lauren, it would make sense for them to emphasize the human being as a temple rather than the physical space of a place to worship. Shneur Zalman of Liadi, as I recall, answered the famous question, like he was alive during the time of the beginning of enlightenment and emancipation, emancipation in particular. And he was asked, what do you think? Is emancipation, is it good or not for the Jews? And his answer is something like this: it's good for the Jews, but bad for Judaism.
Right. Okay.
Right, which is interesting, Steve. This idea that emancipation is going to give autonomy to Jews to do able to things individually, but it's going to break down Jewish community, and it's going to be a challenge, in terms of Judaism and faith itself. And George, he wasn't wrong in terms of, certainly the American experience.
Well, he was a favorite of the Tsar. They let him set up in St. Petersburg.
Correct. That is correct. But
outside of the usual area of Jewish.
But again, like he was prescient in terms of the implications it would have. Look, people say that the American Jewish community has been more successful than anywhere else in terms of our achievements. Well, at what cost does that come in terms of Jewish identity and of Jewish community? So that in that way he was prescient. All right, so we're going to go now to his writings. All right, and let's see, who has not read that would like to read? Steve, go ahead, please.
The idea is that the tabernacle represents the resting of God's presence on the Jewish people, as it says, and I shall dwell amongst them. And it says, a temple of God it is. What is this need for a godly abode down below? Our rabbis teach us Midrash Tanchuma.
Right. It's in the Midrash Tanchuma, which is a compilation of Midrashim.
God desired a dwelling place in the lowest worlds, but does it not say that the heavens and earth I fill? But the concept is that this dwelling place is the revelation of godliness. Blessed be his name. The lowest world specifically should have this revelation, and these lowest worlds are not a place. After all, God declares to Moses, the place is with me, which means that both above and below are not places in the physical sense, but represent levels in and expressions in godly expression. In this lowest of all worlds, it is the lowest of godly expression, because it is the last rung of the levels of orders of creations of the worlds. Therefore, here in this world, the conceptualization of godliness is understood in a way of hiddenness and great darkness. God desires that we light up the darkness specifically. How do we do this? Through mitzvot and Torah. This explains a statement of our sages.
All right, so this is going to be one of those kind of what do we call it? Haiku. Not it's a when you have what is it in Buddhism? A koan, right? Where something like two ideas that somehow don't always I think are readily apparent or feel that they're harmonious. Go ahead.
This explains a statement of our sages. 1 hour of teshuvah and good deeds is greater in this world than the whole world to come. This is because through one deed in this world, one can draw down more godliness than anything in the next world.
Right. So, by the way, the full reading of Pirkei Avot, Steve, is how does this one begin? I'll start it from here. 1 hour of tshuva, of repentance, right, is greater than all of the world to come. And greater is 1 hour in the world to come than all of the, than all of tshuva mitzvot of this world. Right? Like, what does that mean? So, Steve, they're saying like each one is unique, this world and the next world. Don't believe that you're going to compare them at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're explaining the first part, though, about what does it mean that 1 hour of tshuva is better than the whole world to come. It means about being able to do something with your own life and to bring light and to, right, to be able to grow. And then in the world to come, you don't have that. All right, so keep going.
We make this lowest of all worlds a dwelling place through making souls in bodies specifically on the level of being separate and unique. By being separate within a body through mitzvot, one can achieve the level of holiness of, I will dwell amongst you. And this is achieved through staying away from evil and attaching oneself to good.
All right, so what is this idea? It's very, right, very mystical, I think, in terms of what this world is about as opposed to the next world. Right? What is this world, according to tradition, if you know Jewish traditions as well? Like George, like, do you know this thing, right? It says this world is simply, Olam Hazeh is simply an entryway to the world to come.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? So George, what does that mean? What are the implications in terms of what this world's about?
I remember when I was studying for my bar mitzvah, and the rabbi was from the Mir Yeshiva. They escaped World War II through Shanghai, and he said, repent an hour before, you die. I said, well, how do you know when that is? He says, that's it, In other words, start repenting so you'll be, at the high level. It was a little high for a 12-and-a-half-year-old to get,
Right.
Right.
And by the way, George, that comes directly from Talmud.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So the idea here is that the real essence of life, the real purpose of life is the next world, Olam Haba.
Yeah.
Which Lauren, I see Lauren's face, I think is saying, like, wait a minute, doesn't Judaism say it's more about this world than the next world?
I mean,
right?
do we even have a view of the next life? I mean, I have friends who are Catholic. They absolutely know they are going to dwell in Jesus's courtyard. I mean, they absolutely know they're going to the kingdom of Jesus. We don't. Do we have that? Yeah. I mean, we're not going to be with Jesus, but
yeah,
we will be with Jesus. We don't know. I mean,
we do have an accepted idea of what is called Olam Haba, which means the world to come. Beyond that, Lauren, we don't know what exactly that is in our Jewish tradition. And so it becomes if you will, the moment of, like some will say, the most traditional way is at death, your soul is separated from your body.
Yeah.
And it's your soul that enters into Olam Haba. And ultimately, by the way, there's resurrection of the dead. And that is sort of like, if you will, the completion of sort of the narrative. But let's go back now to what is the goal then of living in this world, Olam Hazeh? According to, if you tie into some of the things we've read, Kathleen, what would you say? Right, because this is like what is this world about?
To redeem the sparks of holiness through good deeds and to trying to make the world a better place through exercise of justice and mercy.
So that's why you need mitzvot in this world, Kathleen, right, and not in the next world.
Right.
You need mitzvot in this world because it has to direct us to do things, right, to make the world a better place. Okay, good. That's one. I like that. Stan, go ahead. Give me something else.
Well, we're told to make our lives a blessing. So everything that we do that enhances, let's say, humanity, the world, whatever you want to call it, is the goal. That it's the Jewish people given by God that task to be a blessing to the world in particular. So that's part of our tradition.
Yeah, but right? So tie for me. It's very nicely said, Sam. But try and connect then the discussions we've had, the commentators, Ramban and Shnozam, the idea about this idea of why the Mishkan was necessary, right? And what this world's about. I want you to try and connect those.
It's not about bringing holiness. That's about bringing holiness into the world. That was why the Mishkan was there, is to make us so that we could be an inner temple for God, right?
So, by the way, this world, we have to bring God into it.
Uh-huh.
And that's why you build that Mishkan from that perspective, Kathleen, is to bring God's presence into us.
Yes.
So good. I love that. I love that. That's very nicely said. Leora, did you have something you wanted to add?
I did, but I don't know that, well, I'll tell you. From what I understand, we are the creation that God wants us to enjoy the world with doing good deeds and mitzvot. We are leit aneg al Hashem. I don't know how you're going to translate that.
By the way, Leora, it's so beautiful because right, our goal, right, our job, Leora, is to bring God into the world, correct? And God gave us this beautiful world, and if you don't enjoy it and appreciate it, so those of you who don't know that there is a teaching that says that we will be accountable for every blessing in this world that God gave us that we did not enjoy the fruits of.
Right.
Okay? So, Leora, I want to thank you that we are supposed to enjoy life. It's not that we're not supposed to enjoy life, Kathleen. Now, you're not supposed to live the life this is where it differs from Christianity, right, Lauren? There's never an ideal about being an aesthetic, right? About separating from appreciating and experiencing life. Like, that's not a Jewish value. A Jewish value is to enjoy life, because that's why God gave all these amazing things in creation. And yet, the ultimate goal of life, though, is to go beyond and to bring God. By the way, think about it, George, this part you're like, think about trying to bring all of the ancient philosophical schools together, right? From
Good luck.
Right? No, exactly. From all those ideas about inward self, being focused on us, being focused outward. They're trying, this Judaism, I think, George, tries to bring it all together in some way of being able to bring holiness and to appreciate the self.
Well, what you might say, this is probably not exactly right.
Lauren, I'm going to get to you in a second, Lauren, I promise.
There's an animal soul, an animal spirit, in which you have to nourish, you have to stay alive, so you can perform mitzvot. But to get to a higher level, spiritual level, Jews are required to do all these mitzvot, so your soul rises to this higher level, not just keeping yourself alive, which is important, or you can't perform these things, but
so
to go higher and higher.
The mitzvah, George, right? So I just want to make sure we're on the same page. The mitzvot are designed to help us rise,
right?
Correct?
Yeah.
And by the way, that's why this madrigot or madrigas, they say, is higher levels of spiritual fulfillment.
Right.
And that's a very Hasidic idea. Good, Lauren, go ahead.
In taking my Musar classes, not only do you feel God within you, but you also see the God in somebody else, and understand that everybody else has the light of God within them. And it's not all about you. It's about understanding somebody else and the burden that they're carrying. And as a teacher, I used to always try to understand the child and the parents of the child, because it wasn't all about me. It was about them and what was going on in their house. And maybe the morning was difficult. And so that's also, the I believe.
Let's go on. Stan and then Kathleen.
Doesn't our tradition also say, though, during Shiva, that what we do influences the soul of the departed, how they advance to whatever, I don't.
To the world to come, right? To Olam Haba. Yes, there is that idea, which it's not my personal theology and not yours, but that does exist. Yes. Kathleen.
One of the things I thought about, and I think it kind of dovetails somebody else's comment. was that maybe we can't have the world to come until we are at a spiritual higher level. We've got to make the world, we have to pass a test to get to the world to come. Because unless we're ready to receive it by doing good things and redeeming the holiness, the world to come can't come. So we are.
So Kathleen, I love it. You're going to get, it'll help with the concluding comment from me is that there's a midrash, it's come from the Talmud, that said if all of Israel would to observe one Shabbat, and there's a variant version that says two, right? If they were to observe Shabbat, then Mashiach would come.
Right.
Right? The idea is if everyone was living to the fullest extent, and which is why, by the way, Shabbat, if you remember, is 1/60th of Olam Haba. It's a taste of the world to come. And if everyone were to do it, we'd actually initiate that Olam Haba. I love it. So as a perfect conclusion, everybody's always a pleasure to share with you. Hi, Gil. Everybody,
Bye-bye.
take care and be